Chairing the Planning Committee meeting today. On the top table are Sarah Everett, Ben Burgess, myself, Eleanor Lamming and Lucy Palmer. We also have Ellie Yarnham and Helen Bowman who will be coming up to present their individual presentations. We are not expecting a fire drill today, but if the alarm does sound, the fire exits are clearly signed in green. This meeting is being live streamed. Members of the public are welcome to film proceedings as long as they are not disruptive to the conduct of the meeting. If anyone wishes to film or record this meeting, please identify yourselves now. No, thank you. Please can you all ensure your mobile phones and electronic devices are turned to silent. Councillors, please do not use your mobile phone whilst the committee is in session. We will have comfort breaks at various times throughout the meeting if necessary. If you must use your mobile, then please leave the room. However, you will appreciate that this could result in you not being able to vote on the matter under discussion at the time you leave the room. The order of business is as set out on the agenda. Members of the public can only speak if prior arrangements have been made, in accordance with the Council's scheme of public speaking. The time allocated is a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker, Parish Council, with a maximum of 15 minutes per category. Only people who have registered to speak will be able to address the committee. The order will be as follows. The planning officer will present the application. Public speakers will then be asked to present their case, followed by questions from members of the committee to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. The order of public speaking is parish or town council first, followed by objectors and finally supporters. Council members who are not members of this committee will then be invited to speak for the allocated time of a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker. This will be followed by questions from members of the committee. Again, these questions will only be to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. The committee will then discuss and determine the application. Finally, there are no provision for members of the public to circulate documents, photographs, etc. at the meeting. Are there any questions before I open the meeting? Thank you. Right, we go to Agenda 1. Item 1, Declarations of Interest. I understand we have three. Joe?
Thank you, Chair. I am predetermined on item 1, the matter of Coltishall, and will step out of the room during that item. Thank you.
Thank you. Vivian? Have you been in discussions about this application? No. No discussions. Okay, thank you. And Bill?
I declare an interest in item number 4. It's housed in council, and I am privy to the case, but I've come here with a clear mind.
Thank you very much. Item 2, apologies.
We have apologies from Councillor Vincent, Chair, and we have Councillor Hempsel as her substitute.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to have a look at the minutes on page 6. This was held on the 22nd of May. Do we have any matters arising from those minutes, please? No? Thank you. Right, we'll go to application 1, which is Coltishall. And I'll hand over to Sarah, please, for the presentation.
Thank you. So this item has previously been referred to Planning Committee back in January 2022, where the decision was made to delegate authority to the Director of Place to approve the scheme subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement and conditions and securing neutrality mitigation. It's coming back to you today because we've got an update in relation to the Greater Norwich Local Plan. So when it came to you previously, it was considered under the Joint Core Strategy. As the Greater Norwich Local Plan has now been adopted by the authority, this is a material change that we do need to report back to you. This is the first of 3 items today that are coming back to you, so we'll just go through it. So in terms of the scheme, it's a 30-house scheme on an allocated site in Coltishall. It's a mix of 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom properties, and it's a full planning application that we have before us today. So in terms of the site, you can just see it on the screen here at Cole 1. It's slightly wider than this allocation, which I'll come on to in just a second. So you can see the site location, which is just off Rectory Road. The site slightly goes into the second allocation, GNLP 2019. Now that was an allocation that has come forward through the Greater Norwich Local Plan. That is now an allocated site as well. So when this originally came before you, Cole 1 was the allocated site, and the second site, the GNLP site, was a preferred option. Since the adoption of the local plan, they're both now allocated sites. So it doesn't fully take up the second part of the allocation. So some of that would be subject to a further application in due course. So again, just to show you a bit more of the detail of the site and its location. So it's Greenfield site on Rectory Road. We've got the Bure Valley Railway, which runs east to the west. To the north of the site, just up here. To the south of the site here, we've got the primary school, the medical practice, and we've also got the recreation ground as well. So just going through the site location plan, just so you can see, so we'll have access, which I'll come through and show a bit more detail on the proposed site plan. That will come off Rectory Road. There is a couple of points of access. There's a main access, and then there's some secondary accesses just to serve a private drive at the front of the site. Again, just showing that in a bit more detail there. So this is the proposed site plan. So since this was last reported to you, there's no changes to the dwellings or the layout of the site. So this is as reported to you and recommended for approval back in 2022. In terms of the replacement policy, so this site is set out, it will be delivering 10 affordable units, which is 33%, which is policy compliant with the GNLP. In terms of the overall size of the site, it also accords with the allocation policies. The affordable housing, probably a bit hard to see on here, are just down in these properties here, and then in this area of the site down here. We do have some bungalows on the site as well, which are located at the front of the site, and also properties over here as well. So there's a good range and mix on the site itself. Predominantly, the site does accord with the Greater Norwich Local Plan and the policies within it. There is some minor variances which we have set out in the report. That does include reference to the nationally described space standards, which are now in. The proposed dwellings do fall slightly short of the space standards. However, in this instance, they're only marginally short, and bearing in mind the time and length of time this application has been in, we think it would be unreasonable now, as this is a negotiated scheme it's only been held up because of the nutrient neutrality issue, and resolving that would be unreasonable, therefore, to ask the applicants to amend the scheme at this late point in the proposal. And again, so I think the site as well, it provides that further access through into the remainder of the site. And as I set out, the rest of the site is now allocated as well, so that will allow that access into the rest of the site to meet the future GNLP allocations. I think the density is the other element where we've got a slight variance from the GNLP density. It's slightly lower than the density that we would be looking at under the GNLP. However, I think in this instance, it's allowed for a better site arrangement, and I think the GNLP does allow some variances where it's around getting the better site arrangement for the proposal, and we've probably got some slightly better garden sizes and slightly more landscaping within the scheme as well. So there are the site variances on the scheme. In terms of nutrient neutrality, the applicants have now progressed the solution to nutrient neutrality, which is one of the reasons we've brought it back to you. So they are looking at upgrading septic tanks with package treatment plants. That approach has all been agreed by Natural England. So we are able to progress that scheme now. One area we are of variance is in terms of the ecology report. We'd just like to slightly amend the recommendation to you, is the applicants will be submitting a new ecology report to us. That is because of the length of the time the application has been in, ecology reports tend to have a lifespan of 1 to 2 years. Because of the length of the time the application has now been in, that time span for that ecology report has expired. The applicants are actually going out on site next week to do that piece of work. So we will be getting them to submit that, and we'll consult with their ecologist before we approve the scheme. So that's a slight variance in terms of that recommendation that we just wanted to bring to your attention. But apart from that, the changes to the GNLP we don't consider make a difference to this, a material difference to this scheme. The scheme is broadly in compliance with those GNLP policies. I think particularly that increased level of affordable housing, achieving 33%. So it's recommended for approval to you today.
Thank you. Are there any points of clarification from the officer from the committee? Paul.
Hi, quick question. You mentioned access into the Greater Norwich local plan site, the other site. That road doesn't seem particularly big. I mean, how many houses are we looking at, do you think, that potentially could go down that road? That worries me a little bit, that if you're going to give approval to this site, you're going to limit what you can put the other site.
So the Greater Norwich Local Plan allocation for the eastern part of the site is for approximately a further 20 houses. Now, as part of that allocation process, the Highways Authority will have reviewed that proposal and the type of road that can go on, and the number of houses that can go from that road, and they obviously were happy with that through the Greater Norwich Local Plan process. Just to add, they haven't objected to this scheme either.
It's just that the plans that we've looking at here, that road is kind of changes at the end, isn't it? And it's like a block paving or something at the very end.
I presume when the new plan comes along, that will be extended, won't it?
That will be road all the way through, presumably, when it's built.
Yes, I think so. I think obviously we haven't got an application in for the second site yet, but I think the key thing here is that the Highways Authority have reviewed all of this, and they are aware of that second allocation, and they have reviewed that second allocation as well, and they are happy with that, and they haven't objected to the scheme.
I think just to add very quickly, but it's just reinforcing the point really that we don't want to and won't do anything to stymie the growth of an allocated site that we've got coming forward. It's a really good point, but we will make sure that allocation comes forward because it's part of the plan that we want to deliver.
Okay, anybody else? If not, we'll go to speakers. We have one speaker. Is it John Shirley here, please? Yeah, we'd like to come to the front, please, Mr. Shirley. Mr. Shirley, you have 5 minutes from when you start. If you press the right-hand button on the speaker.
Good morning. I'm a resident of Rectory Road and speaking as an objector to this application because I believe it will add to environmental harm. The adopted Greater Norwich Local Plan includes strategic policies to guide future development and plans to protect the environment, and I don't believe this application meets critical parts of the plan. Natural England's actual comment is that Broadland District Council's own nutrient neutrality calculator had been used to calculate the nutrient budget for this application, and this deviates from Natural England's calculator and the methodology provided in their advice on 16th of March and 7th of October 2022. The local authority must be satisfied that the calculator is based on robust evidence and takes a suitably precautionary approach, that data is robust and can't be challenged. So why was the following data used in the calculation? In a development of 30 2, 3 and 4 bedroom homes, totalling 81 available bedrooms, there are only 56 occupants. Using ONS occupation data, this would be 72. The water usage of 110 litres per person a day is also below the 145 litres per person per day average. Using ONS and available data, this would increase water usage by 68%. To upgrade 5 septic tanks and 1 private treatment plant, there's no data provided to confirm these are currently causing any excess phosphate pollution. Nutrient neutrality wasn't a known at the last committee meeting, but sewage treatment was, and the application states connection into a foul sewer. As the application site extends onto the second allocation, GNLP 2019, this was originally proposed as a 1.4 hectare site for 20 dwellings. It's now covered by the adopted plan. The January 2022 committee meeting completely omitted to state that there's a document, the Greater Norwich Water Cycle Study final report published March 2021. This was funded by the Greater Norwich authorities, of which Broadland is one. It says in relation to allocation GNLP 2019, now increased to 25 houses, that the foul sewer connection capacity, there is none or potential environmental impact from storm overflows. New infrastructure may be required. That was 9 months before the January 2022 committee meeting, but was neither mentioned then or covered in the report. 13 of the 30 dwellings for this application are located on GNLP 2019, yet currently there is a live application 2023-2422 for phase 2 of 25 houses. This would bring, excuse me, the applicant's total to 38 on the 25 dwelling allocation with no sewage capacity. So how does Beela Water Recycle Centre, how's that going? Well, in 2021, there were 96 overflows for a total of 1,714 hours. 2022, the dry year, 29 overflows, 167 hours. 2023, 105 overalls, 2,000 overflows, 2,017 hours, the worst in Norfolk. Anglian Water's plan is to increase their use of tankers in the short term and then treat waste at Whitlingham. So what happens there? 2023, 25 overflows, 367 hours. Anglian Water's comment for this application, latest, does not have capacity, steps will be taken, presumably more tankers. Even these figures don't factor in the backups and overflows into businesses, homes and gardens when, due to high water table, the lower sited homes in Coltishall receive sewage overflows from higher areas, i.e. where this application is. This happens. Last year I helped a distressed elderly resident who had sewage coming up through the toilet in his house and garden, and was surprised that Anglian Water only escalated it to an urgent call out when we threatened to tell the authorities. Most of this overflow sewage ends up in the Bure, doesn't even get to Beela. I therefore strongly object to this application as it contravenes GNLP Policy 3 on environmental protection and enhancements, as well as the statutory protections in the National Planning Policy Framework. It should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shirley. Are there any clarifications from the speaker, please? Lana.
Yes, yeah, I know it is. So I'm trying to, thank you for speaking today. I think out of your presentation, what I'm getting out of this, that the only ask of this planning authority is the calculator of how many people per dwelling and the water use. Would that be correct? Because from my knowledge, it's you know, the overflow and sewage. That's I guess that's a contract between the government and the water companies, and there's not much we can do about that. So have you raised this calculator with officers before with regards to nutrient neutrality? Because I know that the septic tank solution is fairly new on the scene. Is that what you're asking us to do, that the septic tank capacity has to be increased to accommodate a different calculator for A, number of people, and B, the water consumption?
Well, I feel that the data to achieve the data used in the calculation seems very light, and Natural England's comment is that the data shouldn't be able to be challenged. It should, but the very low occupancy level predicted of these properties, and allied, I mean that's the nutrient neutrality part of my point. So on the one hand, Natural England may have, I've raised this with Broadland District Council planners over quite a long period. but I haven't actually had a response, and I have actually written to them saying there's no response, and Jo Copplestone will back me up on this because I've copied her in at, I think, pretty much every stage. So yeah, it's the issue is around the nutrient neutrality. But my other point is that at the previous planning hearing in 2022, the document, the Greater Norfolk Water Cycle Study, was not mentioned, and yet that had been published 9 months earlier. And Beela is classed as foul sewer connection capacity amber, which says there is, just bear with me a moment, none or potential environmental impact from storm overflow. So in the village of Coltishall, we have had issues for a lot of years with Anglian Water's main, because the water table is so high relative to where their sewage pipe is. People at the low part of the village and businesses, the Rising Sun pub, shut for several months because they had sewage backing up and coming out of their toilets, because the pumping station at Coltishall occasionally just cannot pump the water, cannot pump the sewage fast enough, so it backs up further up the hill and finds at the lowest point, which is people's properties.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shirley.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Sarah to come back in on this one, please.
So if I just pick up the calculator first. So we do use the Norfolk calculator to work out nutrient neutrality as opposed to the Natural England calculator. The Norfolk calculator has been developed specifically with the impacted authorities in Norfolk, so Broadland, South Norfolk, City Council, North Norfolk and Broadland, along with Royal Haskoning, to have regard to those specific local factors impacting them, as opposed to the Natural England calculator, which is the national calculator. In terms of occupancy level, the occupancy level is taken at an average level. And that's used in all the calculators. Obviously, it's looking at average household size in the area. So obviously we will have some properties that might have more people living in them. We'll have some people which have less people living in them. So I think we probably all think of 4-bed houses with only 1 or 2 people living with them. So it takes that average figure, and it's that average figure that we use for that calculator. And then again, that calculator has been agreed in discussion with Natural England as well. So they have seen that all that work as that's progressed, and that's a calculator that we are using across Broadland to look at nutrient neutrality. In terms of the water uses per day, I know you talked about average being 140 litres per day. We will be putting a condition on this application requiring it to be at 110 litres per day, so that will match that amount set out within the calculator as well. So, and that again, building regs are also increasing the level of, I'm not saying increasing the level, but it's actually reducing the level of water that capacity that each property can be used per day. So we will be setting that as part of a condition as 110 litres per day that the applicants will need to meet. And similarly, we will also be securing the nutrient neutrality mitigation as well as part of that Section 106 agreement. In terms of the foul water, obviously there is the approach we would normally use is for foul water to go into mains drainage. That's in terms of the hierarchy, that's what we would be looking for that to do. I know there was, as part of the original application, Section 4.5, we did have comments from Anglian Water on it, which did set out that there would be capacity, but they wanted that to be secured, a condition to secure that foul drainage going to mains. So again, we have put a condition on for that as well.
Thank you. We're going to go to general discussion now. Lana, please.
Fair enough, Chairman. I just wanted to ask the officer another question.
By all means, go ahead.
So my question is, if there is an agreement between the affected Norfolk authorities and Natural England as to the occupancy rate that we have a slightly lower one, I think that would have been helpful to have shared that with the public speaker, because I know there's like nothing worse than seeing two sets of figures and seeing where, you know, a different one is applied locally as a justification material consideration in approving a planning application or recommending it for approval. So I think I'd ask officers to perhaps share that assent with Natural England more widely. Thank you.
Okay, noted, thank you. Shall we go to general discussion, please? Eleanor.
Thank you, Chair. This application was new to me. I wasn't on the planning committee when it went through, so it was interesting to read it. And I recognise that clearly a lot of concerns were raised in the original application. There were, I think, 63 representations from local households, which is fairly significant for the size of development. There's just a couple of things. It is a shame the proposals don't meet the minimum space standards or the need for 20% accessible homes, but I do understand it's not reasonable to insist on this. It is just a bit of a shame, but my understanding is it's mainly due to sort of lack of storage space in those dwellings. So I deem it would be better to see those standards increased, but it's not a reason to refuse the application. It is on greenfield land. It will have an impact on the environment, but it is a key part of the local delivery plan. It was in the joint core strategy and it is in the Greater Norwich local plan. The good points are it is accessible to local services. It is integrated into the built form of Coltishall. The parking doesn't seem to be an issue. Highways are happy with it. And I'm actually pleased to see that conditions have been added on water efficiency and energy consumption. That is good to see. And it's also good to see that there are going to be 33% affordable homes planned as part of the development, which is great. That's what I'd definitely like to see in every development. I do note that there's setting up of a management company for open space maintenance. I recognise that this is standard practice these days, but I have to say I would still much prefer to see local councils taking on this role in perpetuity. But those reasons for that, I've raised a few matters that I looked at as part of the application, but I don't see any of those being reasons to refuse this application, and so I feel I can support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I'd like to concur with Eleanor's discussion there. And I think the 33% affordable housing is good. There's going to be 10 houses there, and there's a good mixture of bedrooms, 2-3 bedroom houses. Ken, would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. I found it difficult to take all these figure information, but I was just want to clarify. I think you said that the neutrality had been covered in this particular site. I was just a little confused about that. But I think you did say it has been covered.
Yeah, so in terms of nutrient neutrality, they are changing septic tanks into packaged treatment plants. So we will be securing all of those details through a Section 106 agreement, which will include sort of actually the installation, future monitoring of those tanks as well to ensure they're achieving the levels that they've set out that they will do. And so we'll have a lot of clauses to make sure that is working correctly, and Natural England are happy with that approach.
Thank you, Chair. I think for me, I'd quite like to see what the impact of this estate would be on the sewage treatment works in Coltishall with that on-site sewage treatment works in place. I mean, do we know what impact it will have? What will be the extra load going through the network, so to speak?
I'll answer that. We'll answer that with the answer that I don't know. I don't know but I'm going to answer with I suppose a hierarchy of how we deal with the application. What we've got is that response back from Anglian Water and from the lead local authority that they're comfortable with the scheme that we've got. The upgrades to the septic tanks, the package treatment plants won't be specifically on the site. They'll be off-site. That will create the credits to deliver the houses. So I don't have the answer, but I suppose what I want to give you is that reassurance that it's followed through the whole process of us consulting the statutory bodies to ensure that they're happy with the scheme that we have. And as Sarah's said, we've been asked to put conditions on to ensure that the appropriate foul and surface water drainage is incorporated into the development, if that helps to answer the question, but not answer it.
I presume that's all been discussed at the previous application in 2020. It's all been covered in 2020 when the application first came.
Did the previous application have this information about the foul water and all the dumping of sewage in the rivers? I mean, was that part of that previous application?
I'll touch upon something that's been mentioned before about the water cycle study. So the water cycle study that supports the Greater Norwich Local Plan, it's part of the Greater Norwich Plan. It's the evidence base that goes in towards us determining some of the growth that we'll have across the wider area. That's water cycle study then led to the allocations. If we weren't comfortable with the allocations, then Anglian Water or others would have objected to it at the time. So I suppose what I'm trying to give you is the confidence that it's been considered in the whole, and I'm comfortable that we've got the right sign-off from the right people in this instance.
Lonnie, you had your hand up, yeah.
Chairman, I still have a slight question still hanging over this, because I know that in the dim and distant past, when I was first elected, there was definitely a move to make sure that our residents were plugged into the main sewerage rather than using septic tanks, because use of septic tanks was an additional cost to this authority, because we legally had an obligation to ensure that those were emptied regularly. So does that same burden apply on this council for this foul water treatment package that's proposed with this application?
So for this application, for the 30 houses before us today, they will be put into the main sewer, so they won't be going to septic tank. Where septic tanks are involved in this scheme is that off-site, some properties that are currently on septic tanks, which we know from the environmental evidence, is that they do tend to have leach nitrogen and phosphorus into the soil. They are going to be changed onto package treatment plants, which don't have that same nutrient issue. So this development itself will go onto the main sewer. Elsewhere, the applicants will be taking some houses off septic tanks and putting them onto package treatment plants. So in terms of our decision making on this application, it's to the main sewer, and that's what we would all nearly always look for. I think through the hierarchy, the drainage hierarchy, we would avoid septic tanks. Now they're pretty much at the bottom of the drainage hierarchy. We wouldn't be looking for schemes to be putting in new septic tanks.
But does the same financial implication apply to this council with the package treatment as well as it does otherwise?
So in terms of the package treatment plants, the Section 106 agreement that we will have will be a requirement for the applicants to service those package treatment plants. So it won't be a cost on the council, it will be a cost to the applicant. They will be required to service those package treatment plants. We're looking at, I think it will be an annual service that they will have to do to those, and they will need to report that back to us to confirm that they are still working as they are meant to, but that will be a cost to the applicant, it won't be a cost to the council.
Okay, Ken.
Can I just clarify? Under the 2.24, there are 3 conditions with the recommendation. Could I ask the officer, are you happy that the points that have been raised by the gentleman, are they covered in the conditions and your reappraisal of the situation? Can I just ask for the confirmation from the officer and for Ben if he's happy with that?
I'll answer for both of us if that's okay. So yeah, I'm happy with those conditions that have been put forward. We've proposed the conditions with guidance.
And they cover the points raised by the gentleman.
Yeah, I'm comfortable that they cover those. Yeah.
Right. It's difficult for me to take it all in and just to listen to that. But if you listen to it and you're happy that the points have been covered that he raised.
Yeah, and just to point to a couple of specifics. We've got condition 24 that talks about water efficiencies. That's the key one in my mind in there.
Yes.
But also within the Section 106 agreement as well, we'll be requiring that nutrient neutrality as well. So yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Vivian?
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with what Councillor Lamming said, and I'm very pleased with the 10 affordable housing unit. So I'd like to propose this application to approve with condition. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other comments, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour of this application, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Mr. Shelley, you may leave if you wish, or you can carry on and listen to the rest of the... Okay, we'll go to application 2, which is Frettenham, and I will pass over to Ellie. Are you doing this one? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is, again, another GNLP update application. So this previously came to committee in November 2022, which had the resolution to authorise the Assistant Director of Planning to approve, subject to nutrient neutrality mitigation and a unilateral undertaking being entered into that secures the contributions to GIRAMS. So since then, we have the update to the GNLP. Outlined in the report are the policies which are applicable now to this application. And so nothing else has changed since it was previously reported to committee, so the design, layouts, etc. are all still the same. Since then, we have got a nutrient credit from Norfolk Environmental Credits. That has been consulted on, and Natural England are okay with that proposal. We also have a signed unilateral undertaking for GIRAMS contributions. So I'll just quickly run through the slides in terms of the proposal. So we have the application that is inside the development boundary for Frettenham. So therefore it's in a sustainable location with access to schools, footpaths, street lighting, etc. At the minute it is quite a large plot. It is a subdivision of a garden, and it's to propose a 2-storey dwelling just to the side of it. Therefore, the recommendation in this application is to approve it, as we now have the mitigation and the unilateral undertaking agreement, and it is only before you because of the update to the GNLP policies.
Thank you, Ali. We've got no speakers for this one, so we'll go straight to discussion, or any points of clarification from the speaker? From the officer? No? We'll go straight to discussion. This is pretty straightforward, I think. Any comments? Lana?
I'd just like to propose officer recommendation, please.
Thank you, Lana. All those in favour of this application, please raise your hand. We don't need seconders, do we? I don't think we did seconders. We don't do those at planning, Lana. We'll do it as I'm doing it. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go over to application 3, Spixworth. Welcome to Helen. If you'd like to start your presentation, please.
Thank you. Again, this is
only before us today because of the update from the GNLP. Members will probably remember this application because actually it was only before us at the end of February this year. 42 Park Road, Spixworth, which is in the development boundary. So there's a scheme there and the layout there for 6 dwellings. The resolution at the time was obviously to approve subject to a nutrient solution in section 106 on gyromes and open space. They have been progressed and we've now got nutrient credits and no objection from Natural England. In terms of the GNLP, most of the policies, the things that we considered at the time are very similar to the original JCS policies. I think the two differences are the density. This isn't achieving the 25 hectare dwellings per hectare. It is lower, but that policy does request that it is looked at the character of that area, and actually looking at this character, then actually 25 per hectare on this site would not be appropriate. So we're comfortable with the proposed 6. It complies with the space standards, so I think in terms of that we'd like to recommend approval because there isn't any significant difference from updates as part of the GNLP.
Thank you. Any clarification from the officer from the committee? No? Paul?
We've not, I mean, we talked about this a lot a couple of months ago, so I mean, if there's no changes, then I propose we go with the recommendations.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the vote, please. All those in favour of the application? Thank you. It's unanimous. Right, application for Helston. Welcome Sarah back.
Thank you. So this is the first of the brand new applications before you today. So this is a proposal for the change of use of numbers 127 and 129 Reefham Road in Helston from C3 dwelling houses into 8 self-contained C2 supported housing units providing 24-hour on-site care. The type of care proposed is for people with mental health needs. This application has been amended a number of times during its consideration since it was originally submitted. This has reduced the number of units within the buildings down from the original 9 down to what is now 8, and has also amended the size and the scale of the extensions of the properties proposed. So the properties are located on Reefham Road. They are adjacent to Pinewood Close. So Pinewood Close is a private drive, and you can see sort of there's a range of detached bungalows and chalet bungalows along Pinewood Close, but these properties are served from Reefham Road. So just to give you a bit of context in terms of the location, Reefham Road forms one of the main arterial routes through Helston. It's a very residential area, or highly residential area, and again just a little bit zoomed in, you can see that just the location here. Reefham Road itself is well served with a number of bus links which provide good public transport access into the city centre. In terms of just the principle of this proposal, we have policy 5 in the Greater Norwich Local Plan. This sets out that for this type of development proposals for this type of housing will be supported where there is good access to local services unless there is a significant adverse impact that justifies refusal. It goes on to set out that the identification by NCC of strategic need for specialist housing will be a material consideration in determining the scheme. So in terms of this application, I have had a conversation with Norfolk County Council, and they have confirmed that there is a need for this type of accommodation in Broadland for people who do have mental health concerns. So this type of accommodation is predominantly arranged for those, not those people who need hospital care, but those who need support before they can go back into their own home. So it's almost that, so it provides that opportunity for people to have their own sort of smaller flats with care provided to get people back onto their feet before they can go back into their own home, but it provides that within a community setting, which is what Norfolk County Council are looking at for this type of development. So in terms of the properties, so these are the existing elevations. Obviously we've got a pair of hipped roof semi-detached dwellings. Number 127, which is the one just here, has obviously been extended previously, and that at the back does have quite a large flat roof extension out the back. So going forward, the proposal now, again, the front of the properties, the elevations, we have very limited changes. We did have a garage located on number 129, and that's being changed into a small single-storey flat roof extension, which will be for the carers as part of their staff accommodation, staff room there. What you can see to the rear is these two-storey hipped roof extensions. We have a small flat roof area connecting those two extensions, and then a single-storey extension as well. These extensions have been significantly altered during the course of this application. They were originally much larger, and we did have a number of concerns with them. We've worked hard closely with the applicants to reduce the size and scale of these extensions. We've also had regard to there being a previous appeal on this site around which particularly looked at the design of the extensions, and particularly noted the importance of that hipped roof design being part of that form and character of the roof and raid area. So that's all been incorporated into the design. The actual extensions themselves don't extend out very much further than what was that original flat roof extension on number 127, and it'll be a little bit easier to be honest to see that once we get to the pictures as well. And the extensions themselves, they're not extending any wider than the property is currently. So the like I said, the width of the property is staying the same. It's just those extensions going on to the back. So just to add a little bit of context, so you can see we originally had two accesses from Reefham Road that will be combined to create just a single access point with parking to the front. And then again, you can see those extensions to the back. There remains a good separation between, this is number 129 and number 131 to the north of it. So there remains a good separation distance there. There's no accesses proposed onto Pinewood Close. The applicants do not have a right of access onto Pinewood Close. A number of concerns have been raised that they might be trying to access it from Pinewood Close, but the access will be from Reefham Road. And the Highways Authority have reviewed that, and they are happy with the access, and that there's also parking proposed as part of this scheme. So just to go into, and apologies, this might be slightly hard to see on the screen. So we do have, so they are 8 individual units with 2 areas for staff rooms. So we've got an area on the ground floor where the garage was for staff use, and an area upstairs as well for staff use. They are individual units. From discussions with the county council, they are clear that for the type of need that this is serving, residents they would be looking to have their own units as opposed to sort of a bedroom and more shared space, because of the type of need that residents having their own front door, that's a particularly important part of this type of use. And the county council were happy with the layout of the scheme as proposed. So just going into some photographs, so you can see the front of the properties there. Again, limited changes to the front of the properties beyond making it slightly more cohesive, and slightly tidying them up there, but obviously the change will mainly be to that front wall and fence will be removed to provide that single point of access with then the parking on either side. So this is the rear of the properties. So you can see that flat roof extension at the moment. Obviously that will be what the new 2-storey extension will go on there, but it won't extend out by very much more, but it will have a hipped roof, and we will have the same matching on the other side. And again, then there'll be a single storey will then come out slightly further. But what you can see here is that good separation to the neighbour, and that is proposed to remain. That sort of level of separation is not coming out any wider here. And again, this is just looking down Pinewood Close. So this will give you a bit of context there. And again, this is just swinging back and looking the other way, so you can see that extension. So I think the actual introduction of that hipped roof, I think that will be, and those hipped roof extensions will be actually an improvement to the design of the property at the moment. I think that flat roof is quite out of character with that wider area, so I think adding that hipped roof will actually be an improvement to the scheme. And again, just showing a little bit further out. So the extensions will be visible from Pinewood Close, but following the amendments that the applicants have made to them to reduce the scale of them and the introduction of the hipped roofs, we think they are considered to be acceptable. So just going back, so the principle of the change of use from C3 regular dwelling houses to C2 is considered to be acceptable and conforms with policy 5 of the GNLP and the Broadland's own policy 5 of the development management policies. We would be using as a condition to secure this use. Following the amendments we've had to the scheme, the design, impact upon amenity and highways are all now considered to be acceptable, subject to the inclusions of the conditions that we have listed, and the proposal is considered to conform to the requirements of GC4, TS3 and TS4 of the Broadland management policies. The scheme is therefore recommended to you for approval, and it's requested that there's delegated authority given to officers to approve this scheme once nutrient neutrality is resolved for the site, and also we've secured the dry RAMS payment as well through a unilateral. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Does the committee need any points clarified? Lana?
Chairman, I may have missed this in the report because the report's quite brief, but are there parking standards applied to this? Because that doesn't seem, it seems an intensification of use. There is no reason why residents or will not have a car each, plus the staff. It just seems, and I know that Councillor Gurney would probably, have a lot to say about, the space for parking on the streets. So.
Sarah, can you clarify that?
So parking standards do apply for this type of development. The parking standards are slightly different to those that apply for a regular C3 dwelling. They are slightly lower. I think the key thing here is it has been looked at, and the parking standards have been looked at very closely by the Highway Authority, and we have had part of that is those changes. This does meet Norfolk parking standards in terms of C2 dwellings, and that's why we are conditioning it to that. If these were just, if these weren't C2, they were just regular C3, it would be slightly on the low side, but this is C2 and we are conditioning it to be that. And I think it is key here. In the main, the majority of residents won't have cars. There will be staffing on site. There will be 2 members of staff on site at any one time with a very short crossover period. But that's all been taken into account by the County Council as part of their comments. There is very good public transport access to this site, and that's obviously a key part of the GNLP policy that says that there should be that good access as well. So I think in that sense that we are content with the level of parking provided for this scheme.
Can I just come back on that? Because to the best of my knowledge, mental health illness does not preclude people from driving their own cars. So I don't understand why these standards would be lower as such. I mean, as far as I know, unless there's an epileptic condition, that's when they have no driving license. That would then, but this isn't a facility. I say facility. This isn't intended for people with that sort of illness. It's for mental health support. And actually, if they're trying to be introduced back into living normally, then I presume it would be normal to presume that if they already had a private car, that they would continue to use this. So I don't understand. And please do explain why the parking standards are on the low side, because it doesn't make sense.
I'll just come back on that, and I'll just point to 4.5 of the report, which is the commentary from NCC Highways, They had looked at it a couple of times. You'll see there were comments originally, then comments on a second consultation, and then comments on a third consultation. And in there they say that the minimum parking has been provided alongside a central point of access. And they are the minimum parking standards for Norfolk County Council. So they are the standards that we adhere to as a council. And therefore, if, without sounding, without sounding like we're being driven by the Highways Authority, they are the standards that we have to work to, because if we tried to demand more parking from this scheme, then we wouldn't get very far in terms of if it were to go to an appeal or those sorts of things. So the use is as a C2 use, as Sarah has said, and so these are the minimum parking standards, and then they're being adhered to. Whether we agree with them or not is, I suppose, a different point. They're the standards that we're working to. And I suppose just to pick up a point, if there were two houses there beforehand, there's nothing to stop those two houses having 4 cars per dwelling, if you see what I mean. And I think the key point that Sarah's made as well, and the reason why I suppose the minimum parking standards require and the policies there, is that we are in an area that's very well served by public transport.
Thank you, Ben. Jo.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really concerned about this application. This is situated in a suburban area. There are chalets and bungalows surrounding it on 2 sides at least. I'm concerned about the bulk of the extensions that are going on to the back of it. But also the location. I'm worried about the noise pollution from this site. I think with 24-hour staff, 2 carers on 24-hour staff, there'll be a lot of changeovers. With 8 residents at the site, you'll have people visiting them. And I'm also really concerned about the parking situation. And I just agree with Councillor Hempsall that it could be really difficult for local people. So I would like to draw your attention to Policy 2, Part 7 of the GNLP, and I'm worried about the noise pollution from the traffic associated with this site and the overdevelopment. Thank you.
As far as I know, one of the properties was an HMO in the past, wasn't it? So it would have similar comings and goings.
And I think the thing is, so all C3 dwellings can be a house of multiple occupation. They don't need planning permission for that, and that can be for, I want to say, up to 6 people living in the accommodation together. They don't need planning permission for that. That's just part of the general permitted development order that can happen. I think what we do have in this is obviously we have 8 residents. There will be on-site care, and I note your concern in terms of the potential changeovers. I have spoken with the applicants in terms of changeovers, a number of people. So they, the carers are proposed to be working for 12-hour shifts. So we'll have, there'll be those two changeover points. It won't be, they're not being proposed to be shorter shifts with multiple changeovers here. I think in terms of the noise, we have considered that quite carefully. You would expect to see these types of developments within a residential area, and our policies do set out that they should be within a residential area, because this is about supporting you know, a residential use. So, and it's about supporting people through that use. I think in terms of noise pollution from traffic, I think it would be very hard to progress that argument. This is Reefham Road is a key arterial route in Helsden, which has good access into the city centre. So I think we would be in a tricky position if we would have noise concerns with traffic on Reefham Road, in particular in Helsden. This isn't on a quiet sort of small close, this is on one of the main roads through Helsden, and one of those main, and obviously with that good public transport access, the reason that there's all those bus stops are there is because it is that key transport link. I mean, in terms of the bulk and size of the extensions, I think for number 127, the actual extension is, I think, only fractionally larger than the current extension that is already there. I think actually there's an improvement in the design from what is currently there at the moment. The extension on 129 is going to obviously match that, but it doesn't actually extend out. That's actually only extending out by a few metres. It's not extending out a huge a huge amount. And I think if we were to see this as an extension onto just a residential property, we'd also be coming forward with this as a recommendation for approval of this for householder scheme for you as well. So I think overall the applicants have significantly reduced, and unfortunately I don't have the pictures of what the original applications were and a lot of the objections were from. They have significantly reduced the size of those extensions as part of this application and reduced the numbers of them as well.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to... Do you have a further point, Joe? Yeah, okay, go on.
Yes, could I have some clarification on the HMO licence? Did you say that one of these houses has held an HMO licence? Because obviously regulations are very stiff on HMO licences, and it would depend on the scale and the size of the property, how many residents there are within the HMO. Thank you.
I think the key point from a planning perspective and considering planning legislation here is that properties can change from C3 use without need for planning permission to have up to 6 residents living there as a household. So both of those properties could, without the need for planning permission, do that at this moment in time. They could just go straight to that. I'm not quite sure on how this was licensed previously, but that's just in terms of the planning regulations, what would be allowed under the permitted development order.
Okay, I'm going to bring the public speaker in. Is it Graham Robertson Hodges? Would you like to come to the front, Mr. Hodges? You have 5 minutes when you start, and if you press the right hand button.
Thank you, members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for the opportunity today to speak before the committee. I am Graham Robertson Hodges, planning consultant appointed by the applicant. We would like to thank officers for their assistance over the course of the planning application process and for their comprehensive report. The scheme before you has been amended significantly to take into account the comments of officers, with a number of occupiers have been reduced from 9 to 8 people. The size of the proposed rear extensions has also been reduced substantially. I'd like to talk a bit about the benefits of the scheme, in particular the provision of the care accommodation. The proposal will provide much needed care accommodation for residents in a sustainable location. The premises will be managed by a Care Quality Commission registered operator who take on the management of properties long term. The operator reports directly to North County Council Head of Integrated Commissioning, who has identified a need for the proposal. The operator is focused on providing care to individuals navigating mental health challenges who have progressed but are not yet ready for complete independence. The proposals will empower them to reintegrate into the community and achieve full independence. The proposals will be well managed by an experienced operator to ensure that no harmful loss of amenity will occur to neighbouring residents. Proposals will be staffed by 2 carers on site with care available 24 hours and a manager during the day. I would add that there have been no objections to proposals from the environmental quality team. The proposals would offer significant social benefits and would meet proven needs identified within paragraph 5.4 of the officer's report. The proposals will also take pressure off the NHS services by allowing residents to live more independent lives and freeing up facilities for those most in need. Transport. Proposals would provide adequate parking to serve the development, including staff, and the local highways authority have not expressed any objection to the proposals following their amendment. The access offers good visibility in both directions. The site is well served by public transport, served by number 36 and 37 buses in a highly sustainable location appropriate for the proposed use. The proposed extensions. The proposed 2-storey extension has been significantly reduced in size from that initially submitted in order to respond to the issues raised by residents and officers. The revised extensions also feature a more sympathetic roof design when compared to the previously dismissed appeal of 127 or even the existing flat roof structure on number 127. I would also add that neighbouring properties to the north have extended the ground floor level. I would just like to summarise to say that the proposals provide significant benefits, most notably the provision of additional much needed accommodation for those in need of care, which will provide additional social benefits and reduce the burden on the NHS. The proposals fully comply with planning policies and the development management policies DPD and the Greater Norwich Local Plan and would be acceptable in other regards. We would respectfully request that the committee resolves to approve the planning application in line with the recommendation of your officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges. Does the committee have any questions for the speaker? No? Okay, we'll go to full discussion then, please. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I think I thought about this very carefully over the last few days, and I think, you know, on the balance, I think this is great. I'd like to support the proposal. I think it's well positioned. It's in the heart of a community. I think it's well needed for people that have got mental health issues who want to reintroduce back into the community, so to speak. I like the fact they've got 24-hour care, so that's good in terms of, you know, the noise issues. There'll always be somebody there who can deal with those things. I think the house itself, I don't think it would be any different if it was going to be two householders. The extensions aren't big enough to make them, you know, any different than a normal householder would do. I think there's a lot of social benefits from that house being there. Certainly couldn't wish to be a better place for bus routes and good transport. And I think it's a great use of existing land to, you know, to redevelop it rather than building new in a greenfield site. So I'm, you know, happy to support it.
Vivian.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with what Councillor Paul says. On top of that, as an NHS employee, we have, even though we have lots of medically fit patients to discharge, but we can't find a suitable accommodation or the social care. That's why there is a pressure in our NHS. There is not that we have got a pressure because of lack of, you know, suitable place. So we need to promote the supporting like housing unit. So I like to support this application. Thank you.
You do. Lana.
Yeah, thank you to Councillor Bevan for his contribution. However, that's got nothing to do with the planning application we have in front of us right now. So my concern with this application is the fact that there's a two-storey extension in an area that is then surrounded by bungalows and chalet bungalows. That is my main concern. Obviously, you know, in terms of parking, Ben was clear that this does meet the parking standards, which is the case. But I do have, that remains my concern, that, you know, it's out of character with the surrounding properties and with the, you know, with the general appearance and, you know, extending already, you know, large properties to extend back. I just think it's going to be overbearing on the surrounding properties. So I'm not content to support this until the extensions are revised to single-storey extensions as are, you know, elsewhere.
I think I would disagree with you there, Lana. The
It's
properties
fine.
along Reefton
I
Road
have
are
a vote,
a mixture.
you have a vote, Chairman. You know, it's fine.
You look at the house next door, that is a substantial house, as big as the one, no different to the one which we're talking about at the moment. Joe.
I agree with Councillor Hempsall. I think this is overdevelopment of the site. Looking at 4.9, one of the comments on the third consultation says one of the properties is being used as an HMO already, and this is causing noise problems. And I think noise pollution and the lack of parking, I think there's only 6 spaces outside the front of the property, 7, sorry, excuse me, 7 is not enough to have 8 residents in this facility and their family visiting and 2 carers, 24-hour care. I think this will cause extreme problems for local residents, and I will be objecting to this. Thank you.
Okay, well, Eleanor, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I do think we need to obviously take into account the concerns that both Helston Parish Council have raised and also the District Councillor have raised, and we've seen those outlined. So in terms of overdevelopment of the site and impact on the amenity of neighbouring properties, but I think we have to look at whether the benefits outweigh the disadvantages in this plan. And I would say overall, I think the benefits do outweigh the disadvantages for the reasons, many of the reasons have been brought up. We're not seeing a change in use. It still remains residential property. A lot of revisions have been made to the plans to make it acceptable. And I think primarily it will really benefit the district. It will provide safe and secure residential accommodation for 8 adults, for which we know there's a need in the area. And it is in a sustainable location. I was actually quite surprised at how good the bus service was when I looked it up. And of course, people could cycle, people can walk. So I realised that often there are concerns brought up about parking spaces, but highways are happy, and I'd like to hope that people will look at getting to work or getting around using sustainable transport. I think there are good conditions on the plan. We've now got hipped roofs, which is good. That addresses the appeal decision, and there's only going to be access from Reefham Road, so Pinewood residents don't need to worry about that. So overall, I think I can definitely support the application.
Thank you. I think this is quite a well-designed structure. It's a much-needed facility, and it's in a position which is serviced by lots of local amenities. There are shops nearby, there's doctors nearby, there's a good bus route. So I will be supporting this application. So can we go to the vote, please? All those in favour of this application, please raise your hand. All those against? Abstention? Okay, so this has been passed, thank you. We'll go to application number 5, which is Elsham, and welcome Ali back to the top table. Whenever you're ready, Ali, start your application. Thank you, gentlemen. You may leave if you wish to.
Thank you, Chair. So this application before you is for the installation of 120 solar panels at Dell Farm at Hayden Road in Aylsham. So I will just point out as well that a previous application was held on the site where we have approved 90 solar panels. These 120 are to be sited adjacent to the existing row of solar panels. So I'll just run through some of the slides. So you can see we've got Aylsham just on the kind of right hand side of your screen in the centre of it there, and the application site is just to the northwest of the centre of Aylsham in that rural location. So again, a more zoomed in version of the site itself. So you can see Dell Farm, which is a listed building as well, just to the left hand side, and you've got some neighbouring properties along Hayden Road opposite the site, and one next door as well. So I'll move on to the location plan. It just denotes where the solar panels are to be proposed for the 120. And then this slide is to show the existing array for the 90, which is in place, and then the 120, which are proposed to be adjacent to that. So I'll move on to the elevations. These are to be almost identical to the ones that have already been installed at that 30-degree pitch to try and gain as much solar as possible. So just moving on to some photographs. So this is the entrance into Dell Farm itself, with the entrance into the field just behind that white van, which is just sited here, so just off to the side. So I'll move on to some photographs of the existing solar array. So this 90 has been installed and is operational. The proposal is to be almost identical to these, with a gap in between to allow for access for the applicant's tractor and associated equipment to mow the fields. move on to where I was stood when I was taking this photo at the top of the field, adjacent to the hedge on Hayden Road. So you can see the neighbouring property at Field House. You've got the rear property at Tudor Rose Barn, which these are the stables for, which have solar panels on them as well. And the location of the solar panels just on the left-hand side as well. So just another one, same location, just different orientation. So you've got Dell's Farmhouse on the left-hand side of your screen. You've got the existing solar array, which is sited just approximately here, with the proposed solar array just to be on this side as well. It's worth noting as well, there is an existing hedgerow across the is that working? Yeah. So the back of the site where the solar array doesn't actually go above that. So it would be quite hard to see them in this kind of this view as well. So I've just then swung round so I can then view the properties on Hayden Road. So I'm stood in the location of where the solar panels are proposed to be. You've got the neighbouring property at Field House just on the left-hand side of the screen, and then you've got the residential dwellings opposite on Hayden Road just on that right side. It is worth noting there is that hedgerow and there are trees on that boundary. Then I've gone out onto Hayden Road itself. I'm stood just in front of those neighbouring properties that I just showed you, and to see their kind of view with the hedgerow in between. There is some slight gaps in between, which there will be some glimpses of solar panels from this public vantage point. Then I'm stood outside Field House. Again, there are some more mature hedgerows and vegetation outside along the road as well. So again, the views into the site are quite limited from Hayden Road itself. And then again, just from Hayden Road, you can see the mature vegetation just on that left-hand side where the proposed solar panels are to be located at the bottom of that field. So I'll leave it on this slide, which is the aerial imagery and the proposed array. So this application is for 120 solar panels to be placed adjacent to 90 existing solar panels. The application is within Blickling Conservation Area, and Dell Farm itself is a listed building. The site, the existing array and the proposed array would total out to be 210 panels in total. This would equate to approximately a third of the electricity which is required for Dell Farm and its associated buildings. Those associated buildings are also holiday lets, which are under construction at the moment, and they are due to be finished in the next few months or so. As the property is listed, it would be very, quite difficult to place solar panels on the roof of the property, given its status as Grade 2. Hence, this application is sited at the lower end of the field to try and maximise the amount of solar that they can generate. Therefore, we have accepted it in principle in that sense, and the recommendation is to approve the application. As on balance, we have considered it as acceptable in terms of the planning policies for renewable energy and for the GNLP as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Ellie, please? Lana.
Chairman, can I just confirm it's actually unusual for arrays of that size to come without battery storage these days. Can the officer just confirm that battery storage is not included at all?
So the battery storage is already in place because of the existing array. There is sufficient in that storage to take the additional 120. If it may be upgrading at some point, that is up to the applicant to do, but that is already in existence on the site.
Okay, thank you. Can I? So on that note, so if there is existing battery storage and there is just additional capacity going into them, I haven't noticed a consultation with Norfolk Fire and Rescue in terms of the additional traffic going through the batteries and how how that would be, what their comments would be on that.
That's a fair point. There's no consultation on there with them. We don't necessarily have to do it as a matter of course, but the point is taken. Councillor Hemphill, and if that's something that members feel as though we need to do afterwards, we could either delegate that to me to take forward, or we could defer the application. But it's a fair point.
Just
So if the so with the chairman, do you want me to answer that? Yeah. Okay. So when you have a battery and you have it currently has, so that battery I presume is now just for the farm. So you have, it fills up and empties as the farm requires. If this solar array is now to serve the farm and some holiday properties, basically that frequency of emptying and recharging is going to be higher. Also, there's going to be, and the current, so the volume of power going in and out is going to be greater. So if that's on an existing battery pack, which I don't know how old it is, then I would actually, as a responsible planning authority, I'd seek some clarification from Norfolk Fire and Rescue if they are comfortable that what the existing battery storage is still going to be safe. That's what I mean, not road traffic. I just meant current traffic. Yeah.
Yes. So we don't need planning permission for batteries. Is that just almost a rhetorical question? Do you need planning permission for having batteries?
I will answer, because you do need planning permission for battery storage of a scale. And so, for example, with the previous permission, we gave permission for the solar arrays with the battery storage. You sometimes see for much larger scale solar schemes, you see big, very technical, big containers basically that are batteries that Councillor Hampton was very right. They can potentially, they need to be considered appropriate by the fire services because they can potentially have a fire risk. And there's things that can be done to mitigate that. But that's for much larger schemes usually. But I just wanted to, I think, reinforce the point that I've just made, or re-endorse it. If that is a concern of members, then more than happy to take that away as if you're comfortable with it as a delegated authority to me to then consult the fire service to ensure that we've gone through that process.
Perhaps it can be considered as part of a
conditions. I was thinking
condition. Yeah, just to make sure that is, we cover that as a condition to make sure that they've consulted the fire brigade and the appropriate things are in place.
I would, rather than being a condition, I would look to amend the recommendation to delegate approval. So as opposed to it saying approve with conditions, I'd look to delegate approval to the director of, assistant director of planning to consult the fire services. Okay. And just to confirm, and just assume there's no issues, that we won't bring it back to the planning committee.
The second question is, how many buildings is this solar panel array going to provide the electric for? With that, because we never talk about housing let. So how many? That's fine.
So the main farmhouse is one. There's a 3-storey approximately building, which is a listed property. You then have 2 barn conversions, which are holiday lets as well. So they are currently undertaking those works. So at the moment, it is just those 3 which would benefit, and say the main house already benefits from those 90. Which are already in place. It is also worth noting that in the summer months, when there is, the sun is higher, they will be pushing that back to the national grid, any overspill in that sense, so pushing that back for everyone else to then spread out and use as well.
Absolutely. When those batteries are full, they will be putting electric back to the grid, which is great for everybody. So as an electrician, I could probably say that there's going to be very little maintenance with batteries. I mean, a lot of big houses will have 4 packs of batteries, 4 or 5 packs of batteries anyway. So I've no idea how many are there here, but a normal householder will have quite a few battery packs, is what I'm saying. 2. Yeah, exactly. I think you're probably right to consult the fire services, because I have no idea how many batteries that they will have. But if you consider a normal house has got 4, at the max, you've got 12 packs of batteries, which, as long as they're in a reasonable, safe location, they shouldn't be an issue with. So this proposal should only be supported, in my view. It stops houses being built on that land, which has got to be a good thing in my book. My only issue might be in terms of maintenance. Is there going to be any traffic? Are these things going to need to be maintained at all? And is there any infrastructure that needs to go in terms of connecting to the grid at all?
Yeah, so because the existing 90 is already there, the services, the infrastructure is in place, the access to them is in place. It is just placing them onto their ground. Now, they are going to be almost like a giant screw in the ground which connects the mount, and then the solar panel sits on top. So they are going to be identical to these ones, which are already in place. But there will be a gap in between the two rows to allow for the field to still be maintained.
Lon, is that a further clarification or is it a question? Well, we're not in discussion yet. I need to call the speaker first, please, if you don't mind. If I could call Derek Player, please. You'd like to come to the front? Mr. Player, you have 5 minutes from when you start.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of Jan Benson, my neighbour, and her husband Carl, who live in Field House. That is the property adjacent to the existing and the proposed array, and referred to in 517 of the report. So I'd just like to read what she has written, because they are unable to be here today. She writes, I have read the planning officer's report of the 19th of June and wish to make just 2 points. First, in relation to paragraph 517, impact on the character and appearance of the area. Although I am unable to examine policy GC4 of the DPD, I note that this planning guidance expects the application to achieve a high standard of design and avoid any detrimental impact, paying adequate regard to the impact upon the amenity of existing properties. My property is the only residence with an unimpeded view from, as the planning officer states in 517, a slightly elevated position of the existing 90 panel array, which was built to fund most of the energy needs of Dale Farm. The additional 120 panels will take up yet more of our visual landscape from our kitchen and side patio. The policy seems to suggest that there is no limit on how close solar panel arrays can be built next to residential dwellings. In fact, given that these panels are being partly built to supply energy to the national grid, there appears to be nothing to stop a third application for even more panels to cover the field even closer to our house. Second point, due to an administrative error on the part of the council, for which the council did apologise to me, I was not given the opportunity of being consulted on the original application for 90 panels. If I had, I would have suggested placing the panels in the field to the south of the Hayden Road, where the owner has already constructed 9 panels. This field, owned by the applicant, is outside the conservation area and is not overlooked by any houses or trees. Thank you very much for your consideration. I also have a photo, I don't know, taken by my neighbours of the view.
I'm afraid there's no...
No, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Player. Any questions for the speaker? No? Okay, so we go to discussion now. Lana, what did you want to say?
So there's a couple of points. Some that were raised by I heard that, well, my understanding is that even this enhanced array will only serve 30% of the entire consumption needs of the property and associated holiday lets. So none of this is going back into the grid. It's just the case that they will need less from the grid than they would otherwise. Secondly, I think I know that we've had, in my history as somebody on the planning committee, we've had large solar arrays next to, grade 1 and grade 2 listed buildings, included churches, and those have effectively sail through the process. So I don't quite understand, because this is in a conservation area, I don't quite understand how and why the impact of these solar arrays is not considered to be detrimental to the integrity of the conservation area. But again, that needs challenge outside of this room, I think, because from what I've read and what I've heard from the officer, these considerations have been addressed. As I said, finally, I would probably be quite happy to propose approval on the lines that Ben suggested, because I do think that the Norfolk and Fire Rescue need to be consulted on this application, because it is a significant increase in the power supply to those batteries, and we just need to hear their thoughts on how they would manage this, especially with the proximity with new developments. So I'll leave it at that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Lana. Joe?
Thank you, Chair. I have some experience of ground-mounted solar arrays, and this is an extremely small one. Even with the original 90, 210 is not many kilowatts. It's very, very small. Looking at the site, there's quite mature hedges most sides, so I think from a ground floor window, sort of looking onto these, it won't be that noticeable, because the ground-mounted arrays, they're not much more than about 2 metres high, which is quite low. And I think it's really great that this applicant is putting in 2 holiday cottages, and I think the benefit of eco-tourism from eco-electricity going into those will be very attractive and benefit the local area economically. So I would really support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Anna?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do note the comments made by Councillor Catchpole, and I'd like to thank the representation from the neighbouring property. I take on board the concerns, and I do think it's a shame that they feel they were unable to comment on the initial application for 90 solar panels. I note there's no concerns from Aylsham Town Council, no objections from NCC Highways, and there's no objection now on heritage grounds. I feel it's very good. The buildings on site will at least be powered partially by renewable energy. I do understand the concerns about the loss of some high-grade agricultural land. It's best and most versatile land, grade 2. But solar panels are potentially temporary installations, so they can be removed in the future and the land can be restored back to agricultural use if so needed. And that, of course, cannot be the case with housing development. The relatively low-level installation of these panels will reduce the impact on heritage assets in the application. And in this case, I think it is appropriate. But more generally, for planning applications, I would personally prefer to see raised freestanding solar panel arrays with agricultural use underneath them in this country. I'd like to see far more use as well of commercial roof space for solar. The climate is changing and we do need to be generating far more non-fossil fuel based energy. So for those reasons above, I do support this application.
Thank you, Anna. Is there any other comments, or shall we go to the vote? Go to vote. All those in favour of this application, please raise your hands.
Could you just confirm that the recommendation is
I think that's
altered, is
taken,
adjusted? Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, but if I just have to read out the wording that I proposed.
Okay, do you want to do that first then?
Yeah, so I was
okay.
just going to propose the wording would be to delegate authority to the Assistant Director for Planning to approve the application subject to a satisfactory consultation with the Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service and subject to the conditions that are on page 99.
Yes, Chairman, that's what I proposed. So, yeah, I'm happy with that.
Okay, good. you all agree, can we go to the vote now? All those in favour, please. Thank you, that's unanimous. Right, I'm going to pass over to Ben for the appeals, please, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this won't take long because there's only a couple. We've had one that's been submitted. This is on page 100 of your agenda, 2024-0094. That's change of use from a holiday let back to residential. We refused the application, obviously, and we felt there was no evidence submitted to demonstrate continued use as a holiday let, it being viable. So we'll see how that goes through the process. And then the other one, the planning appeal decision that we received back, the appeal was dismissed, and that went along with the reasons that we proposed it for refusal, and that's at Wood Green in Selhouse, and that was for highway safety and not proposing reasonable amenity for future residents.
Thank you. If that's all, we'll draw to a close. The meeting finishes at 11:05. Thank you for your attendance, everybody.